Hey, what's going on YouTube? Chuckles again with another World of Warcraft video. Today we're going to be talking about the second part of LFR in the High Mall raid. So this one's not much harder, to be completely honest. The first boss here is Tectus. These are three like mini bosses that you have to do right before Tectus spawns. He spawns right in the middle of this big room looking thing. So there's a green one, a purple one, and an orange one, and they all have their own little ability that you have to worry about and deal with. So the green guy, he will turn like members of the raid, he'll poison them, and they'll turn into like a pulsating poison. So if you look on the left hand side over there, you can see that druid over there, the resto druid, it's poisoned right now. See how it's emanating like poison? So you have to move away from the rest of the raid or else it will damage everybody and it can spread and it's all kinds of bad. The orange guy, he will spawn the big orange pillar that falls from the ground. Like, it'll have a yellow arrow on top of it. That you want to try and stand in. It splash damages, so the more people who stand in it, the less the raid takes, but it has to have at least one person or else it blows up and really hurts. In LFR, it's really not that big a deal, but in normal, mythic, heroic, all that kind of stuff, you really have to manage that. So the idea would be to kind of, I don't know, stack as much as you possibly can, and then the last one there was the swirls on the ground that you need to avoid. That's from the purple guy. So this is Tectus. He has quite a bit of abilities, and it's a very interesting fight. I really like this fight. So it starts off with just Tectus, phase 1, and that cloud that you see right there, that red cloud, that's called Crystalline Barrage. He will target somebody, and then he starts like making that cloud, excuse me, that cloud follow them. So you have to, essentially you want to run it to the right, and then he spawns two ads. One's an Earth Warper and the other one is a Berserker. The Berserker's the big guy that you can see right behind Tectus. I know the camera's not the greatest. You don't really have to worry about him in LFR. I mean, he'll die from splash damage, but the little guy, the Earth Warper, he does have to die. He should be your #1 target. Tectus will also do Fracture and Earthen Pillar. So Earthen Pillar is what he just did on the left, and you saw me get out of it. That will cause like a permanent pillar. I mean, it goes away after a little while, but it's a permanent pillar for a little while. And then the small one there that you just saw me run away from, that is Fracture. That just creates a small one, comes up, goes back down. So Tectus, he goes down, and then he splits into two little Tectuses. So now you have to manage two of them, and they all do the same abilities. You no longer have to worry about the ads, they stop coming. But once the two shards split, they each split into 4 apiece. So in normal, this can get very hectic, and you see that druid is doing a terrible job of running that barrage away from the raid. In normal, that would have caused a wipe right there. In normal, he does Tectonic Upheaval, and that's the only time you can kill Tectus or his shards, is when they're doing the Tectonic Upheaval. In LFR, they just go down flat, not a problem. So you really have to manage when you're going to pop your Time Warp, or Lust, or whatever you want to call it, Heroism. See, now I have the Crystalline Barrage. So what you want to do is you just want to run it away from the raid, and then, I mean, even if it stops your DPS, it's much better to manage the barrage than it is to be DPSing. So with those earthen pillars, you want to kind of, in LFR it's really hard. All they really do is just put them wherever, but you'd really want to set where they're going to be. So you would put all of your groups stacked in one spot. Whoever gets the barrage, you run to the right. Whoever gets the pillar, you then move slightly to the left. That way you can keep them all manageable. You don't want to split Tectus too often, too quickly. Even in LFR, like right here, now we have 8 shards of Tectus, or motes. Yeah, they're motes when they get to the 4th one. That can be quite a bit to deal with, even in LFR, because now you're going to have 4 to 8 people with Crystalline Barrage, 4 to 8 Fractures, and sometimes even 4 to 8 Pillars. So you really have to watch that. It's really good to note that Tectus, the shards of Tectus and the motes of Tectus all come with a passive ability called Acceleration or Accretion or something like that. Starts with an A. Their damage stacks 5% every stack they get of this Acceleration or whatever it's called. How you deal with it is by doing 1% damage to that particular Tectus or shard or mote, and that will lower them by a stack. So they're always going to have one stack, but you don't want like you can't just DPS one down. You have to do it evenly. So that's pretty much Tectus. Really fun fight. In heroic and normal, it's much better than LFR. Okay, next up is the twin ogres, Pole and Fimos. Pole is the one with the shield and the looks like a mace, yeah, like a little club or something. And Fimos is the guy with the two weapons, axe, and I think it's just like a club itself too. So we'll talk about Pole first, the one I'm targeting now, the one with the shield. He does shield bash, which what he'll do is he'll target someone and then he'll rush at them with his shield. So what the tanks are going to want to do is keep them as close together as possible, so splash damage, because they share the same like health pool. So you'll want to keep them as close as possible for splash damage purposes. So he'll do shield bash on the shield bash on the tanks. He'll do shield charge. That's when he targets someone and charges at them. He can do interrupting shout. He does it when he's at 66 energy, and what that basically does is interrupts the entire like raid, physical damage, and everything spellcasting for 6 seconds. So you don't want to be casting when interrupting shout is going off. Next, when he's at 100 energy, he'll use pulverize, and what that does is it causes rocks to fall from the ceiling. It's really easy to manage. You just stay away from it. Pole is the easier of the two to deal with. Fimos is the one that I personally find to be the pain in the butt. So what Fimos does is he does double slash against the tank. It's a really heavy. Like in normal and mythic and heroic and stuff, that really hurts. That's the one you have to deal with. When he hits 33 energy, he does whirlwind. That's when the tanks need to split them up. You don't want your melee to be in range, or even your ranged people. You don't want them to be near that whirlwind. It will tear you up and drop a raid real quick. He also does enfeebling roar, and what enfeebling roar will do, that's when he hits 66 energy. It's sort of like the interrupting shout from Pole. He debuffs all players within 20 yards of him to take 300 more damage. So you really don't want that debuff when he starts doing his whirlwind. It will really tear you up. That swirl right there, that's the pulverize. Yeah, that's the pulverize from Pole. Next he does quake. He does that when Fimos, that is. He does quake when he's at 100 energy. He throws his weapons at 2 random locations, okay? And they just pull that's the fire on the ground right there. Fire just emits from them, and it's like a blaze, and it goes everywhere. It has a stacking dot that applies to you that lasts for 12 seconds, and I mean that fire can really start to add up. Like you gotta do your best to avoid it. I mean, standing in it for a little while is not a huge deal. It's not gonna like wipe the raid, but you really don't want to stand in it for long periods of time and get that debuff. So essentially, it's not that hard of a fight. You keep them close together, and then when they hit certain energy points, you split them up. You keep them close together, that way you can do splash damage because they share HP pool, like I said. You deal with the mechanics. You don't want to stand in pulverize. Don't let the rocks fall and hit you. Avoid the blaze on the ground from Fimos. Yeah, Fimos is the one who does it. I get them mixed up sometimes. But the main thing to worry about is the whirlwind. It really hurts. The tank really needs to drag the Fimos, the whirlwinding one, away from the raid, and you gotta have them split up. You really don't want your melee to be standing in that. The shield charge, I don't know if we've seen it yet, or if I just didn't mention it when it happened, but the shield charge is pretty easy to avoid, but you don't want to be standing in front of him when he is charging it at the select target. It will mess you up pretty bad. It'll knock you back. And then you also get a bleed effect called injured. There it was right there. You get injured, it's a debuff, and it'll do damage over time as well and make you take more damage. It just puts a lot of stress on your healers. That's just completely unnecessary. So the way I handle this fight is I try and keep my target one to be Pole, because that's generally speaking where your melee is going to be. Because you don't want to be targeting Fimos and be really close to him for a whirlwind. So you see me got locked out right there. That's because I was casting when his shout went out. So yeah, in LFR it's really not a big deal. You gotta avoid the whirlwind, and that's essentially it. Avoid the whirlwind and you'll win. We had a few deaths throughout this pool. But again, it's nothing major. You'll down it. It's not hard. Just avoid the whirlwind and don't be standing in front of him when he does his shield charge. Okay, last up in the second wing of LFR is Corage. I'm not really 100% sure that's how you pronounce it. That's just how I say it, but Corage. So it's a very interesting fight. He starts off with a nullification barrier, sort of like Lady Death Whisper, and you have to take down the barrier before you do any damage to him, actually, which is kind of cool, but the barrier withstands a lot of damage. So a few things to go over during this fight. One of them is called overflowing energy. You can see it on the right hand side. It's that ball that's falling towards the ground. So when it goes off, it does a massive AoE, and that'll do like a little bit of damage, not much. Easily avoidable, you just don't want to be near it. Now, you can intercept it, but what I'm going to tell you is that's a bad idea. It will hurt you, so you don't want to do that. It can, in normal, it can actually kill you. Next, he does what's called Suppression Field. He does it quite a bit, but he charges to a random player. Generally speaking, it's a ranged, and then he slams his like hammer or mace on the ground and leaves that void zone right there. So you avoid the hit, and then you stay out of the void zone because you're silenced inside there. When he goes to the middle of the room, that's because he's trying to recharge his shield. So while he's doing that, he spawns those anomalies right there, the little white-looking things. They don't do any damage, like they don't hurt at all. But what happens is when they die, they do an AoE thing too, and it's called Destabilize, and it does raid-wide arcane damage. But if you kill them inside the zone, then the silence effect hits them, and they don't get to use that ability. So in LFR, it's not that big a deal. You don't necessarily have to, tank them inside the zone and kill them inside the zone. But on normal, mythic, and heroic, like it's pretty important. You have to do it. So you'll tank them inside the zone, kill them inside the zone, and then you won't get the damage from the destabilize. Next, he does several different expel magics. So the first one I'm going to talk about, because I find it to be the biggest pain in the butt, is expel magic Shadow. So he uses it throughout the fight, and it places a debuff on all raid members that absorbs healing. So essentially, if you have Expel Magic Shadow on you, you can't be healed, which is an interesting mechanic in my opinion. Next, he does Expel Magic Frost, and what that basically does is it creates an orb of frost that moves around the room. Like, it doesn't just stay still, it kind of goes in a circular pattern, and it'll deal raid-wide frost damage, but the biggest thing is if you're caught in its AoE, you move really slow. It can slow you by up to 85%. So not only are you extremely slow, 15% of your normal movement speed, but you're taking damage from the ball as well. So luckily I'm a mage and I can just blink right out of that stuff, but it's quite annoying. He also does Expel Magic Fire. He places a 10-second fire damage, like damage over time thing on the character, and when it expires, it does a high amount of fire damage to all players in a 5-yard radius. So in LFR, again, it's not that big a deal, but in normal and stuff, you have to spread out for that kind of thing. You don't want to be all grouped up and then all of you guys debuff at the same time, and boom, next thing you know, there's a bunch of fire damage going out. If you watched right there, I was actually stuck in that orb of frost and had to blink out of it. Last but not least, he does Expel Magic Arcane. He puts this on the tank, and what it does is it's a debuff, and it causes them to mark their location every like half a second for 10 seconds. And like usually about a second to a second and a half after the location is marked, it explodes. And it does quite a bit of damage to everything in a 5-yard radius of that mark. I'm sure you saw it throughout the fight. I didn't call it out when I probably should have, so you could have saw it. But essentially, you don't want to stand near it. I mean, don't stand and stuff. Rating 101. It also causes the tank to take 100% increased physical damage from him. So that's when the tank swap happens. When you get your Expel Magic Arcane, the other tank takes over. In LFR, again, it's not a big deal, but in normal, mythic, and heroic, you really have to deal with that. So essentially what it breaks down to in LFR is you avoid the balls falling from the ceiling onto the ground, try to stay spread out so the fire doesn't eat you alive. Don't stand in void zones because you won't be able to cast anything. Take down his barrier, let him move to the center of the room, kill the anomalies while they're inside of a void zone, DPS the boss till he dies. Don't stand in void zones, I can't stress that enough. And then after that, it's just rinse, repeat, collect your loots. So I hope you guys really enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.